Okay. Alright, now we're going to be getting into the birth of Jacob's children. These 12 sons will lead to the 12 tribes of Israel. This is pretty important. This is where the people of Israel come from. There's also going to be the birth of a daughter mentioned here too, and we'll get into that later. But the important thing here is the sons, definitely. So Jacob has gotten married to two women, two sisters. Rachel, the woman he wanted to get married to, and her older sister Leah, whom he actually got married to first by a treachery from the girls, or trickery maybe. Maybe not quite treachery, but trickery at least, from the two sisters' father, Laban, Jacob's uncle. And Jacob wanted to marry Rachel. He did not want to marry Leah. Don't know really why. I mean, Rachel seems to have been more attractive, at least to Jacob, than Leah was. From the moment he saw Rachel as she was coming out to water her sheep, he was motivated by her. Leah didn't have that effect on him. I'm not sure what it means for Leah to have weak eyes, or tender, or soft, or delicate, or whatever that means. I don't know if that means she had a problem with her eyes that made her physically unattractive. It could be. I mean, maybe. I just don't know. I don't think that expression is found, at least in terms of connecting them to eyes, anywhere else in the Old Testament that I'm aware of. I'm not really sure what the Hebrew word behind weak there is. That word can whatever it is, it can also mean soft, delicate, or tender. That word itself appears elsewhere in the Old Testament, but it doesn't appear in context with eyes, so I don't really know what that means. I don't know if anyone really knows what that means. I don't think I've ever really read a satisfying explanation to what that means. At any rate, for whatever the reason, whether it had something to do with her eyes or something else, maybe her eyes made Jacob weak when you looked at her, I don't know. He didn't want to marry Leah. He wanted to marry Rachel. But he has in fact married both. So he's a polygamist, but he is not intending to be a polygamist. Not only that, he has both of their maidservants too. So he's basically got 4 women. Okay, so that's the situation as it... Now, this is all happening after the first 7 years of Jacob working for Laban. He got all these women basically in a big bunch after that first 7 years, during that interim in between. Again, as I said earlier, I was at a point in my life for a long time where I had always assumed, just kind of believed, that he didn't get Rachel until after the end of the second 7 years. I just, somehow, and I didn't even think about that until about a year ago. Somehow or another, I had that idea in mind. I must have been taught that or heard that or read that somewhere back in my youth, in one of those children's picture books of the Bible that I read as a kid, or maybe in Sunday school or church or school. I went to a Bible school, Zion Lutheran School, up until 8th grade. Somewhere or another, I had gotten that impression that he didn't marry Rachel until the end of the 14th year. But that's not true, actually. He married them both at the end of the 7 years, and then had to work another 7 years to justify or pay for Rachel. And of course, he got them and their maidservants at the same time. So instead of marrying one woman, he now basically has a harem of 4. So that actually does. I talked before about the extreme weirdness of Jacob's timeline. The timeline of Jacob's life is extremely weird, and that's going to come into a big factor here as we work through this next batch of births, because he's going to have a lot of kids in a very short amount of time. Almost impossibly short amount of time. I mean, there's 4 women having these kids. So when you add all up together, it's possible, but he's going to be popping. There's going to be a lot of sexual activity and pregnancies and deliveries in this household in a very tight time frame. Anyway, so here we are, Genesis, chapter 29, verse 31, according to our reckoning. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, so the Lord is sympathizing with Leah here, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So another barren woman, third in a row of Israelite men, or Abraham and his descendants, his sons, marrying barren women. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben. For she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." Reuben means, or sounds like, according to our footnotes down here, Reuben sounds like the Hebrew for "he has seen my misery." The name means "see a son." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." And so she named him Simeon. Simeon probably means one who hears. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. Levi sounds like and may be derived from the Hebrew for attached. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, that's number 4, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Judah sounds like and may be derived from the Hebrew for praise. Then she stopped having children. So Leah has had 4 sons back to back to back to back to back. I'm assuming that she's having these sons basically as quickly as it's possible for a woman to have kids. If each pregnancy is about 9 months, the average length, and if there's a month or so in between that she's taking a break, and then maybe getting pregnant again almost immediately after, I mean, she's having basically 4 kids in 4 years, I think. I mean, these are coming out boom, 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 one right after the other. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, and I don't know how long it would have taken her to realize this, but she's in a race against her sister, so as her sister's having one after another, Rachel will be getting very impatient. She became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" Jacob would definitely prefer to have children with Rachel. He favored Rachel. Rachel was the woman he actually wanted to marry. So there's no question that Jacob wanted to have sons by Rachel. So it's not his fault. I'm sure he's doing the best he can to get Rachel to bear him sons. Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and that through her I too can build a family." It'd basically be a surrogate mother. So we saw this all the way back with Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. This was a common practice then and now. We still use this sort of thing today. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and has given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Dan here means he has vindicated. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali. Naphtali means my struggle. So the sisters are in direct competition with each other. They are not getting along. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, okay, so this is after the 4th at least, she took her maidservant Zilpah. Now, I don't know if these 2 children here, Dan and Naphtali, I'm not sure if they're coming out numbers 5 and 6, or if they're happening interspaced in between 1, 2, 3, and 4. It seems to reason to me that Dan and Naphtali would be somewhere in between 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm not sure if there's ever... Let's take a look here. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm not sure if we ever do get a complete list of Jacob's sons in strict birth order and not arranged according to their moms. I'm not sure. There is the order that we're reading it now, I think, is I just am not. with all the various genealogies, I mean, it may be in there somewhere because there are a lot of genealogies. I'm looking at chapter 49 where Jacob goes down the list and blesses them all. Trying to see how, because I'm not certain. Like I said, there are so many genealogies, I can't keep track of them all. No, they don't. I mean, it's not in that order, so. Anyway, I'm not. Let's see here. The old. Let's see here. I should probably edit this. I need to actually edit a bunch of these now. So, I don't know. Honestly, thinking off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific moment of all the times the tribes of Israel are listed. I'm just not sure if I can think of a moment when they're listed straight up in birth order according to the literal timeline in which they were born. I was looking at a few places later in Genesis, but they're usually arranged according to their moms. You have Leah's 6, and then the others that came from the other 3. And I don't know. I'm going to have to look into that. Because the timeline here is extreme. I mean, we all know how long pregnancies take. And then I'm assuming, they would have had a very, very, very quick turnaround. As soon as they were physically ready, these women would have been trying again to get pregnant and bear Jacob some more sons. That was how they derived their worth in this culture at this time. The worth of a woman was directly tied to how many sons she could bear for her husband. So these women would have been, and since there's 2 of them, 2 sisters who were in direct competition with each other, they would have been raring to go as soon as possible after they would have had each one of these sons. So this is a very, 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 very quick timeline. But I'm not entirely certain, because you have Leah's and then you have Rachel's. But you also have these maidservants that kind of get spliced in there, and I'm not certain where the maidservant sons fit into the birth order, because I'm not sure if it's all happening. Like, for example, as I just said, Dan and Naphtali may have, and I think probably were, born sometime in between during the middle of these first 4 that Leah was having. But as far as I can think, and and again, and I'm not going to pretend that I have the entire Bible memorized, especially the Old Testament. And so there may be a place somewhere that it's not coming to mind that actually lists the sons in their strict birth order. But it's not coming to mind. I'm thinking the places that I am thinking of don't actually list them according to their birth order, but they clump them together according to their moms, the women that Jacob had these sons with. They list them in birth order according to that. Like, you'll see Leah's listed in order, but you'll have like Leah's in a group, and then you'll have Bilhah and Zilpah, and so it's like I'm not thinking in all the times the tribes are listed in the Old Testament or even in the New. I'm not sure if there is a comprehensive list of the actual specific birth order. I just don't know. There may be, and I'm just forgetting it, or maybe this fact is in my mind somewhere and it just slipped. Anyway, I'll look that up. Maybe I might edit this video later in case I get some information on that. Anyway, so moving on with the story. So we have 6 sons now, 4 from Leah, 2 from Rachel's maidservant Bilhah. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, so this is after her fourth, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. I see, okay, so my thinking is that Rachel would not have waited until Leah had had all four of her first sons before she tried to get sons of her own through her maidservant. So I don't think that we had four from Leah and then Dan and Naphtali. I think Dan and Naphtali would have been born somewhere within the time frame of the first four from Leah. And then we have a break from Leah at least. And she follows her sister's example and gives her husband Jacob her maidservant Zilpah. So she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" So she named him Gad. Gad can mean good fortune or a troop. Or the other thing she may have said, according to the footnotes on here, is a troop is coming. Good fortune probably sounds a little better, but I mean, she already has a troop. She's got four of these already. So what good fortune seems to make more sense in context, at least to me. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. Asher means happy. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the field. So Reuben, I don't know how old Reuben is here, but he's old enough to go get some food, pick some mandrake plants. Now, how old would he have to be this old to do that? 10, 12, 14, like I'm just not sure. Which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? You take my son's mandrakes too." So these women do not get along. These two sisters have a very strained relationship. "Very well," Rachel said. "He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." The mandrakes are supposed to have some sort of an aphrodisiac type ability to encourage fertilization and fertility. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. I don't know if that's been established as being a legitimate property of mandrakes, but these people at this time believed that. So when Jacob came in from the field, now the text, by the way, doesn't necessarily endorse this or anything like that. It doesn't even comment on it. It just says that's what happened. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. So they're in the tents. They would have each had separate tents, and they would be feuding with each other. Jacob would have been spending his time in Rachel's tent because Rachel was his favorite wife. And Leah wanted him in her tent, so she made a deal with Rachel to give her the mandrakes that Reuben got in exchange for getting a night with Jacob in her tent. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. Jacob doesn't even get to say a thing about this. Poor Jacob is being bounced around back and forth. He knows what it's like to be used now, doesn't he? He used other people in the past. Now he knows what it's like to be used. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Issachar sounds like the Hebrew for reward. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulun. Zebulun probably means honor. Sometime later, I don't know when exactly later, but apparently after the 6 sons, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah, which is a female form of Dan, and Dan, as we saw earlier, means he has vindicated. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She became, now that doesn't mean he forgot Rachel to begin with. Remembering in this context means he's going to take action. So she became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." Joseph means may he add. So she named him Joseph, which means may he add, and said, May the Lord add to me another son. And he will, but it'll be at the cost of her life. Not being able to have children would have been a disgrace to women of that day. It still is somewhat that today. There is still a certain element of disgrace, not nearly to this degree that it would have been back then. I mean, the value these women had to society was to bear sons for their husbands. I mean, that was their worth. The more they could do that, the more they were worth. If they couldn't do that, they weren't worth much. Rachel was a shepherdess. We saw her doing that earlier before she was married. I don't know if she was still doing that after she got married to Jacob, but before that she had been. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way, so I can go back to my own homeland." So his 7 years of service for Rachel must be up by now. "Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I'll be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please to..." Actually, you know what? Let me start a new video.